No one can convince me that steak at a restaurant is better than having it at home, so here's how you make the perfect steak dinner. Pat your steaks completely dry, then season generously with salt and pepper. Sear the steaks in a ripping hot pan in some beef tallow for about 1 to 2 minutes per side. You know you're doing it right if the fire alarm goes off. In that same pan with all that flavor, go in with some butter, minced garlic, chicken broth, heavy cream, black pepper, and rosemary. Once it slightly thickens, finish it off with lemon juice, fresh chives, a little more butter, and those steak juices. I made some crispy roast potatoes to go with this because they soak up that sauce perfectly. I just cooked them in some beef tallow with salt, pepper, and a little bit of rosemary. Then just plate everything all together, pour that sauce on top, and it's ready to enjoy. Sometimes you choose your meals, and sometimes your meals choose you. I knew I was making pot roast for dinner the moment I walked past the most perfect cut of beef roast at the grocery store. Start by seasoning your beef with some Montreal steak seasoning, salt, and black pepper, and then sear it in a hot Dutch oven with a little bit of beef tallow until it gets a crust on both sides. Then go in with some onions, garlic cloves, and tomato paste, and since I'm not using any red wine, I'm gonna go in with a mixture of soy sauce, ketchup, brown sugar, and apple cider vinegar for a little more depth of flavor. Then the beef goes back in along with some beef broth, chicken broth, bay leaves, rosemary, and thyme, and pop this in the oven for about 3 hours, adding in your carrots about an hour in. Once the beef is nice and tender, strain everything out of the liquid so you just have the liquid gold, and then make a gravy by adding it to a roux. Then finish it off with some white pepper and browning seasoning sauce for a little extra color. Serve this up with a side of creamy mashed potatoes, top it off with that gravy, and it's ready to enjoy. I've never enjoyed steak at a steakhouse as much as I enjoy the steaks I make at home, so let me show you how I do it. To make the mushroom sauce, start by slicing up some mushrooms, not too thick and not too thin, and also mince up some garlic. Saute the mushrooms in olive oil until they're lightly golden, then add in butter, minced garlic, flour, salt, and pepper, and let this cook for a few minutes before you add in your chicken broth and heavy cream. Add in some fresh sage, let this simmer until it's a bit thickened, and then finish off with pecorino romano. You could do any side really, but today I was craving some creamy mashed potatoes, which the secret to is just mashing the potatoes through a really fine mesh sieve, and then finish it off with some heavy cream and butter. For the steak, if there's a fat cap, always sear that part off first because that will release some oil into the pan. I forgot to show this, but I always try to cure my steaks, which means you put it on a wire rack with some salt and pepper in the fridge for a few hours, but ideally overnight. When you add in the butter to baste at the end, turn down the heat so the butter doesn't burn, and let your steak rest for at least 5 minutes before slicing into it. Then just plate it up with the mashed potatoes, some roasted broccoli, and of course that creamy mushroom sauce. Top it off with fresh parsley and enjoy. If you're craving the flavor of fajita and Southwest at the same time, make this Southwest fajita steak bowl. Season your steak with ground coriander, black pepper, and salt, rub it in gently, and then do the same on the other side. Make a Southwest sauce by combining mayonnaise, chipotle peppers and adobo sauce, lime juice, some sugar, spices, and avocado oil. I also made a little avocado mash to go with this, which is just avocados, lime juice, garlic powder, salt, and pepper. I cooked the rice with some chicken bouillon and a bay leaf, and then when it was done cooking, finished it with some cilantro and lime juice. Ideally, you want to cook your steak in some beef tallow, which is going to add that extra beefy flavor, and then use that same pan with the remaining beef tallow to cook down the onions and peppers as well. Once the steak has rested, you can go ahead and chop it up into little bite-sized pieces, then plate it over the cilantro lime rice, and it's ready to enjoy. Almost once a week, I make a dinner that looks something like this, and this version with a pomegranate molasses butter sauce is something you need to try. I always like to pop my steaks on a wire rack with some salt and pepper and keep them in the fridge for at least 4 hours before cooking. This helps to dry out the surface, which means you get a better crust when you go to sear the steak. If there's any fat on your steak, always sear that part off first. I like to sear my steaks for about 1 to 2 minutes per side and then baste it for 30 to 60 seconds when it's almost done cooking. Then transfer to some aluminum foil and lightly cover while you work on everything else. Mushrooms go so well with steak, so I like to saute those in the same pan, seasoned with garlic, salt, smoked paprika, a little bit of butter, and lemon juice at the very end. For the butter sauce, it's just butter, minced garlic, and pomegranate molasses whisked together on a low heat until everything is combined. This dinner pairs so well with some roasted butternut squash that I cube up and cook in either the oven or the air fryer along with some roasted broccolini. Then just plate your steak on top of your veggies, top with that pomegranate molasses butter sauce, and it's ready to enjoy. Let me show you how I made this entire Sunday roast from start to finish in 1 minute. Prep for a Sunday roast starts the day before, so here I'm making the Yorkshire pudding batter, which should be a runny consistency but still cling to the back of a spoon like this. And if you're going to be making your gravy from scratch, this is also the point where you want to make your thick, gelatinous beef stock. Now on the day of, you're going to want to start with the roast potatoes because those will take the longest to cook. Once your potatoes are knife tender, you're just going to roast them in any high smoke point oil. I'm using ghee and avocado oil. Next side dish is a cauliflower and cheese, so I'm just making a bechamel sauce, adding in some Gruyere and Monterey Jack, then pouring that over some roasted cauliflower, top with more cheese, and bake until golden perfection. Next, I'm making a marinade, which is just oil, mustard powder, and fresh thyme for my roast that I trussed and cured in the fridge the night before. Salt and pepper generously, then roast at 500 degrees for 15 minutes, reduce the heat to 350, and roast for about an hour. Then cover with foil and rest for at least 20 minutes. For the Yorkshire pudding, you're just going to heat up some fat in a muffin tray, add in your batter, and pop them in the oven for 25 minutes. For some veg, I roasted up some carrots and brushed on a balsamic honey glaze in the last 10 minutes. You want to carve your meat at the very very end just before serving. Then all you do is plate it up and top it all off with that delicious gravy. I have 2 rules when it comes to traveling in my house. Number 1, the day before travel, we're getting takeout, and 2 days before travel has to be an easy, quick meal with minimal leftovers. So here's what I make. First, I saute a whole box of cremini mushrooms with some garlic powder, paprika, butter, salt, and pepper. Then I like to cheat and grab something from the grocery store that is frozen and a carb source. That way I don't have to make it myself. Then I like to cook a protein that's going to require minimal seasoning, which is going to be either a steak or some salmon. For my steak, I just do some salt and pepper, get a nice crust on all sides, toss in some butter, and then baste it. I would add some rosemary if I had, but I didn't want to buy a whole box of rosemary just to use 1 sprig and then waste the rest, so this will do. Lastly, I blanch some broccolini in boiling water for just under 2 minutes. Then at this point, my steak is rested and I can slice into it. Then I just plate everything up nice and cute, add the steak on top, and I mix the mushroom juices with the steak juices and put it right back where it belongs. This is the perfect amount for 2 to 3 people, and I can almost guarantee that there will be no leftovers.
Let's make the best breakfast in the world. First thing you do is give your russets a quick haircut, chop them into cute cubes, just drizzle them down with some good oil, then just hit them with any spice rub that you enjoy, toss and gloss them, then just air fryer oven bake at 375. Now for the star of the show, an Australian Wagyu BMS 9 strip steak. In a very lightly oiled hot pan, we're gonna sear it fat side down, and then once it renders through, we'll get it crusty like you. When it peels off on its own, it's ready to flip. Then you just wanna tilt the pan and baste it in its own fat. Now very importantly, we'll allow this to rest, and in that beautiful fat, drop the heat and crack in your eggs. Then I'm gonna hit my beautiful eggs with some SPG. Time to slice in our beautiful rested steak, and then to finish we just need a little bit of flaky salt. To me, that's the perfect bite. Your potatoes should be done in about 20 minutes. We can't forget those beautiful eggs, some fresh berries in the back so we're healthy. You gotta dunk the steak into the egg yolk, and as always, now bismillah.